Well, good morning and good afternoon to you all. Welcome to today's Tech Talk with Zyxel. My name is Nguyen. I am one of the product managers and solutions manager, sales manager here at Zyxel North America. Today, we have also on the line and will be guiding us through a lot of our presentation today will be Marcus Holmes. He is our systems engineer. So just by a raise of hands, make sure that everybody can hear me okay. Just let me know that you can hear my voice. It's not too loud, too soft. But I think we should be good to go. But again, welcome again. We like to do these kind of tech talks, kind of regularly, and it's kind of interactive. So we'd love to have you use the chat box when you can, use the Q&A box. Let us know if you have any questions while we're asking this, and we'll try to stop in between, in line and talk about some of that. So today we wanted to cover about how to configure most of the common scenarios. I know last week on Thursday, I had a webinar regarding the different solutions and products that Zyxel has to, offering remote access to your customers, to yourself as a company, how to maintain business and do that securely. So today we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that in terms of what maybe the technology is and also how you can configure those remote access as well. So if you did miss the webinar last week, make sure you can check. We've posted it online. I think it's on your YouTube as well, but also on our Facebook page. So go there and check that out if you want to look at what we did last week on Thursday. So let's go ahead and move on. We have a bunch of slides that we want to show, but again, welcome to today. Let's see. So Zyxel is, just a quick introduction of who Zyxel is before we jump right in. If you haven't heard who Zyxel is, we've been around for 30 years. We just celebrated our 30th year last September. We power over 100 million devices globally. 600 employees worldwide, 700,000 businesses serving 150 markets. Now, of course, you may notice that the name here is a little bit different. And that's why our number in terms of associates is also different from what you might be used to. It used to say 1,500, but now our companies actually have kind of gone into two branches in terms of Zyxel Network is now the channel business, kind of part of the business. So now we're known as Zyxel Network. So from here on out, you're going to see that used. Zyxel Communication is going to be set for all of our telco type products and things like that. So service provider kind of side of the Zyxel brand. So Zyxel is internationally recognized. We have innovation across a wide range of product lines. We've been globally recognized with all of our products from consumer all the way to the telco in all the different markets. And we are solution driven. That's what we pride ourselves in. We do all of our R&D, our designs of our products, and our software that we integrate into our products are really made to work with what our partners need. So your feedback as partners to Zyxel is very important to us because we need to know what you are seeing in the field. What are your needs? How can we make the product better? And that's where we can work with you to doing and integrating that. So we have R&D resources worldwide that allow for us to do all that. So any feature requests that you have, you can work with Zyxel directly to get that into that ecosystem and into that product line. And a lot of our partners have got a lot of benefit from that. And of course, we cover a wide range of products. So our portfolio is full of anything that connects to a network, security appliances, wireless, internet connectivity with switches, with fiber. I pretty much tell everybody if it connects to a network, Zyxel has some sort of equipment for that and to be able to manage that completely. So here I will hand it off now just with the quick introductions. Again, welcome to this Tech Talk. We have Marcus Holmes, our systems engineer, who will be covering how to configure the most common scenarios, and look forward to seeing you at the end of the presentation. So thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Tri. So what Tri was saying, we're going to talk about how to configure the most common scenarios for remote access for VPNs. Excuse me. So we want to start with what a VPN is, because I'm quite sure a lot of people have already started hearing VPNs when it comes to remote access, specifically with what's going on right now in the world. A lot of people are working from home. So basically, what is a VPN? A VPN is a private network that allows users to connect their computers, laptops, and mobile devices remotely and securely to an internal network. This is usually done using software that is either installed on the devices or using ones that are natively built in. When the VPN tunnel is connected, that is encrypted to enhance the security so that malicious actors can't decipher what's being communicated through the tunnel. Most VPN scenarios are where VPNs are used, or where you have a headquarters, and at this headquarters office, you have remote users who need to access shares behind the gateway or firewall. So in this scenario, you'll see that we have like a VPN firewall, and then we have employees that are at home who need to access, say, a specific file, or they need to access their computer. Well, this can be done using the VPN software. So what about other remote software connection types like RDP? Well, with RDP, you have ports that are exposed and they're mapped directly to devices. So that means that if anybody's doing a port scan, they'll be able to see, oh, well, this person's using 3389. They can start hitting that port with remote desktop, and then it can bring up a computer. Once that comes up, the username and password can be brute forced. So they can use a dictionary attack. They can use any means necessary to try to get into that computer. And then once that person's actually inside the computer, they have full access to the whole network. So that basically means that it is a security risk by just using RDP. And this is where VPNs come in. So with VPNs, there's 3 different types of VPNs, especially with Zyxel, that we actually work with. The 3 of them are IPsec VPNs, which is your most common type of VPN. You have L2TP over IPsec, which uses a layer 2 tunneling protocol, and then it actually overlays into the IPsec protocol. And then we have SSL. Out of the 3, SSL is actually the easiest and preferred method because ISPs tend to block specific ports. Like with VPNs, you have 4500 and 500. And if the ISP blocks those, then you can't use the IPsec software. With SSL, it does everything over 443. With SSL, the software is actually free on Windows, but on Mac OS, it's actually paid because we use a specific software to actually get the SSL to work. With IPsec client, it's actually a paid client on both PC and Mac OS. And then finally, L2TP is not as secure, but is actually native on all devices, including mobile. Now for the pros and cons of IPsec VPN. The pros is being that with IPsec VPN, it is actually the most secure option. And this is because you have the ability to choose the encryption algorithms and the strength. Now the first 2 points with the speed and the encryption are hand in hand. You'll see that it actually is the fastest throughput. However, the stronger your encryption is, the slower the connection is. With IPsec VPN, it can be configured for a full network access so that you can actually control or access anything on the network when you have the VPN tunnel connected. You can control the access of all the resources by creating ACL lists in the firewall. So that means that when someone connects up, you can make sure that they are only accessing the specific shares that they need to access or nodes. So if someone connects a VPN, you can make it so that, well, if Susan connects, then she only has access to her computer only. But if maybe the CEO connects, he has access to more resources. So that's all controlled in the ACL list in the firewall. With IPsec VPN, you can either do a site-to-site, which is one site, one headquarter to another, say, store, or you can do a single office where a remote user is connecting in with a VPN tunnel. Now, as far as the cons, the thing with IPsec VPN client is it requires that software is installed on each device. That means each computer has to have the software installed. We have our own Secu extender that you can install, but there's actually a price that you have to pay for that. There's a cost for the license. Now, on the con side as well is that it's a little bit more complicated to set up. Now, this can be eased with the Zyxel VPN wizard that's included in all of our firewalls. And there's also a auto provisioning tool that helps. However, it still is more complicated and is not the easiest to set up when compared to, say, SSL VPN. And then finally, you need to have an understanding of your network in order to block specific resources. So if you are not a full network admin, you may not be able to install ACL lists or configure ACL lists in order to prevent people from getting access to things that they shouldn't have access to. L2TP over IPsec. Now, L2TP over IPsec, again, is supported on all firewall devices. And the great thing about it is it's natively supported on Mac, Windows, Android, and iOS. So there's no additional software that needs to be installed. There's no extra cost, and it can be configured to act as a full network member, just like IPsec. And again, just like IPsec, you have control over the resources. The only problem with that is, as a con state, it requires multiple settings to get set up for the user. So it's not as easy to set up because you have to go into the L2TP settings on each device and configure multiple settings in order to get it to connect. And again, you need to have an understanding of the network in order to block the resources you don't want people to have access to. With SSL VPN, supported on all firewall devices, it's already supported by most remote user browsers because it uses the browser. And then also it's simple to configure. It's equivalent to logging into a secure website, and it's very easy to control what applications are accessible in via the SSL VPN. And this is all done in the firewall. There's a couple options that you can set in the firewall by dragging and dropping specific applications and or IP addresses that you want the SSL VPN to be connected to. Now, the only bad things about this, or the cons, is basically it's depending on the client device, and thus the throughput can be very low. So out of all the options, SSL VPN is actually kind of the slowest. And then you can it's limited to access specific applications. And with SSL VPN, you cannot do a site to site. It's purely client to site. Now, as far as USG series support, you can see that L2TP and IPsec is fully supported across the board. But when it comes to SSL VPN, you'll see numbers like in our data sheets that show two different numbers. The first number is the supported numbers out of the box. So for instance, looking at the USG 40, it supports 20 SSL VPN tunnels out of the box. If you want to upgrade to the maximum of 30, you have to pay for a software license to unlock the 10 extra seats. On our VPN series firewall box, it's pretty much the same thing. When you get the device by default on these devices, VPN 50, VPN 100, and VPN 300, there is a default number of SSL VPN users. So you'll have to look at the data sheet to determine how many seats you need open for the SSL VPN connections. And finally, with our ATP series, is a little bit different. There's no license to unlock it. So basically, what you get from default is the maximum that you can have. So you can see that it ranges from either 30 SSL VPN tunnels all the way up to 800, or sorry, all the way up to 500 on the ATP 800.
Also, if you'd like to find out more on the details on the hardware itself for these series, the USG, the VPN, and ATP, you can also refer to the previous webinar that we did. We covered a little bit more in depth of what the models are. Also, in general, the SSL VPN tunnels that you see here in this number, it's based on the newest dated firmware that we've released in order to enhance or increase the number of SSL VPN tunnels that it supports out of the box. So you will see on the data sheets now currently, there'll be the older number, which, for example, the ATP 100 will show 10 SSL concurrency. But now with this special firmware, basically, it's a free firmware upgrade for everyone. You would have 30 seats into that. So make sure if you are using it or your customers are already having or are already using one of our firewalls that they can take advantage of this extra bonus SSL VPN that we have offered in a special firmware.
Alrighty, and finally, our Nebula series. As of right now, the Nebula series does not support SSL VPN. It only supports IPsec and L2TP. Nebula series being our cloud-based platform. So just keep that in mind if you want to use SSL VPN. As of right now, you're going to be using the non-Nebula firewall gateways. Okay, so which VPN is right for you? Let's take a look at a couple scenarios as to finding out which VPN would be best to use. So in this application scenario, we're going to look at a company called ABC, has an ATP 500 firewall, and is allowing their employees to work from home. Each employee has a company-owned laptop, Windows 10 installed, and the users need to access their own desktop machine as well as other resources. Since some of the files that the users will be working with are very large, they want the fastest VPN client connection. So even if they have to pay for it, they were willing to get it. So the answer to that solution is going to be the IPsec VPN client, mainly because it's the fastest VPN connection, the client doesn't mind the licensing cost, and the company has provided laptops, which allows them to install programs. Now, if the company has not provided laptops to the customers, and the customers have their own laptops, they may not be willing to have programs installed. So that's something to watch out for. And it has a somewhat easy client setup with auto provisioning, but again, it still requires you to have some network knowledge to set up ACLs. And then it also requires you to set it up on the VPN, set the VPN on the hardware itself of the firewall.
And also just a word of just a message too. I think one thing that people won't realize or don't realize is even though they go to a VPN solution and they go to and kind of pick the product, or they say, hey, we're going to do remote access. One of the big things that you may end up finding is as people are using the remote connection, your internet connection at the main office is not capable of it. Because a lot of times we worry about download speeds, right? So in the office, a lot of it is download. They may have a 300 meg download, but their upload speed may only be like 10 or 15 megs. And that's pretty common. And so either way, you have to either look at that as your, because your upload speed will be the person's download speed at home, right? So you're trying to upload stuff to them, but they'll be only going at, a 15 meg, or you may be sharing that across multiple people as well at the same time. So the throughput is going to be a concern. So either you have to upgrade your connection at the office to allow for maybe a synchronous type connectivity with that you might get with fiber. You can get up and download speeds to be much quicker. So that's something to keep in mind, just as a word of advice.
Okay. Application scenario number 2, Susan is being allowed to work from home. She's often on the go and needs to access her files at the corporate office on both her phone, her MacBook, and her Windows-based PC. The corporate office has a USG 310 as their main gateway. So in this particular scenario, we want to do L2TP over IPsec because it can be set up on multiple operating systems, including mobile devices. So you can see the actual settings here. You see the Windows settings, the Mac OS settings, and then iOS and Android. So there are some things that you need to set up on each one of these devices to get it working, but it is available and it does work on all the platforms here seen here. Okay, and then our final scenario, application scenario number 3, Bobby manages a small company that has a USG 210 as their gateway. The company has remote users that currently have Windows as their OS that need to access internal software. Bobby wants something that is easy to configure on the client side and doesn't want to pay for licensing. Speed of the VPN tunnel is not a huge concern. So of course, with this scenario, you want to go with SSL VPN because of the ease of use for the client setup. The client doesn't want to pay for licensing costs, and of course, speed not being an issue. Okay, so with that out of the way, we want to go over some best practices for VPN settings. These are some questions that are usually asked, specifically our Zyxel technicians and tech support. So when it comes to the IPsec VPN, one of the things you want to do is use the VPN wizard setup. And this is found in the USG, ACP, and the VPN series. So this gives you a couple questions that you need to answer in order to set up your VPN, and it makes it a little bit easier to set up. But if you need a little bit more granular settings, you'll have to do it manually. So this goes back to what we were saying earlier about having the knowledge and having the ability to make the changes in the firewall to set up the more granular rules if you need to. Now, of course, we do have the auto provisioning feature on the VPN client for IPsec VPN. What this does is it allows you to set up the settings on the firewall, and then you can use a username and password on the client. So all you have to do when you boot up the client is point the user to the host where the VPN is, put your username and password, and then it will automatically download the configuration. So there's the VPN provisioning settings that are in the setup wizard. You set up a username for that client. And then on the VPN client, there's a get from server option. And you just plug that information in and it'll download the configuration from the firewall. For IPsec, again, if the user is only going to connect to their own workstation within the company, there's an option within the IPsec VPN client called remote sharing. And what this does is that once you open up the tunnel, it'll automatically open up an RDP session to that machine without the user having to know the actual IP address or host name of that desktop computer. So this is great when you only want to have a VPN tunnel connected to allow users to connect to the remote desktop within an organization when they're remote. All they have to do is fire up the tunnel. It'll automatically open up the RDP with the credentials box, and they have to enter in their information.
And of course,
Now,
the benefit of that is that it's all within the tunnel. And so it's secured to connection rather than just punching a hole through a firewall and getting into your office. Is that correct?
Right. And then in general, you want to set rules in your gateway to only allow access to specific resources. Now, let's just say that you have a company NAS and you want only people to access that NAS, because when you open up the VPN tunnel, they'll have general access to everything on the network. So they can just start putting in IP addresses to access everything. You don't want that. You want to make them only have access to the devices or specific resources they need. And that's going to be set up in the gateway rules and the firewalls. You're creating ACL lists in order to allow or deny access to specific resources. You want to change your pre-shared key every 90 days or as often as possible. This is just more of a security thing that we suggest to our customers because most people set up a VPN and they just kind of forget about it. You want to kind of cycle through your pre-shared keys every 90 days if possible. And then also consider extended authentication if the location is using Active Directory. We have a couple guides that can help walk you through this. If the location is already using an AD server, you can incorporate that into the VPN so that in addition to using the built-in encryption algorithms, you can use extended authentication where they have to authenticate using Active Directory. And then that opens up a more options for rules for ACLs because you can do it based on the user. So that makes it a little bit more easier to configure rules as well. And finally, add two-factor authentication for sensitive locations. We do offer two-factor authentication as an option. What this does is you can do SMTP to text. You can set that up so that when someone connects to the tunnel, they have to enter in a two-factor authentication in order to get authenticated. And of course, we have our business forum to help you with installations and troubleshooting and support. We can give you that link. You can see it here in the picture here, but we do have a business forum that'll help, especially for those who are working from home. Okay, now for Q&A.
Yeah, at this time, if there's any questions, things that you want covered or specific applications that you're looking for, please feel free to use the Q&A section and send that to us. Marcus, do you have the Q&A box open as well?
I do not. I don't have it open.
So I will ask the questions and when it comes in. Looks like Craig Pittman says, currently I have an IPsec IKE v2 working well, and it's using the client, but I have to use SSL for Macs using the secure client. Ideally, they'd like to use the IPsec IKE v2 on Macs for performance, but they're struggling with that. Is there any options for that?
As of right now, I don't believe there is. We can check with our local tech support because they've been fielding a lot of these questions lately, specifically when it comes to the Mac, because there's a lot more Mac users out there. But we can definitely circle back to find out what's going on.
Yeah, because I think they're looking for like an IPsec with the IKE v2 for the Mac client.
Yeah, I think it's non-Zyxel, but I believe there is IP Securitas possibly for Mac. I believe that has IKEv2, but I think that's the only one off the top of my head that I know of.
Thank you, Paul, for that question. Yeah, we'll follow up on that. And Paul also asked, I see on the GUI on the Apple Macintosh claims to support the following VPN protocols, the LTTP over IPsec, Cisco IPsec, and IKE v2. So do we know if we have a configuration for the built-in for Apple Macs using just what's built in for IKE v2?
I'll check and see if we have a walkthrough for that, because IKE v2 I know is a very much needed requirement, specifically for helping to secure your data, and when it comes to PCI compliance as well. I know that IKE v2 on our end for the L2TP and IPsec are supported, but it's just a matter of getting the clients to connect using the IKE v2. So we will definitely take a look and find out if we can get maybe a walkthrough out to you guys, or put it on the biz forum.
And Marco asks, what's the difference between IKE v1 and v2?
It's basically the security key exchange. IKE v1 is actually being kind of phased out, and more people are being pushed to IKE v2 because it's more secure. One of the things is PCI compliance. If you're doing any type of transactional data, like if you're a store or processing credit cards, you will get a PCI scan audit, and it's a requirement that you have IKE v2 if you're using any type of VPN tunnel. So if you have the VPN tunnels exposed, they will test against it to see if you're using IKE v1 or IKE v2, and IKE v2 is a requirement to pass PCI compliance. So it's a matter of having more secure key exchange with IKE v2.
Now, you did mention like if it's exposed, but now if it's not exposed, if it's locked down to just point to point, then is that still a requirement?
It's still a requirement, because even if you're doing, let's just say that you have a VPN, a point-to-point VPN tunnel or a site-to-site VPN tunnel, that port's still going to need to be exposed because it needs to connect across to get the VPN tunnel. So they'll scan, they'll see the ports open, but then it will test against it to see what version of IKE you're running for the PCI scan. So even if you're doing a site-to-site, like from headquarters to a remote store, they'll still scan against that.
Okay, Alex asks, using SSL VPN for users back to the office LAN with a Windows Active Directory, and they're finding that they have to add a host entry on a client machine by host name and not by IP. Are they missing something in the settings?
You need to use a Win server, because the DNS through, or sorry, the host names through, or NetBIOS, I'm sorry, through the SSL VPN tunnel has some issues. We've seen that across the board, not just with us. But it's required, or it's recommended that you use a Win server if you want to do it that way, if you want to do it by host name.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions? Yeah, again, please use the Q&A. Again, we like to use this time as an interactive time. And so this is where you can get some of your answers. We have our system engineer, who of course, as you can tell, very knowledgeable about our products. I think between the two of us, we have like almost 30 years of
yeah, just about 30 years.
Of Zyxel, 30 years of Zyxel experience. So that's quite a bit. Again, if you haven't joined our partner program, again, make sure you join that. We get so that we can support you. You get access to people like Marcus in order to help you with your solutions. So we're also here to support you. Again, use those resources that you found in the business forum that we saw on the previous slide for any kind of help, and a lot of information there. Let's see. Joe asks, can Nebula do IKE v2 VPN?
Only on site to site right now. Client to site is being worked on.
So it is going to be planned to have.
Yeah, it's planned. They wanted to get it for site to site first because, of course, before all the stuff with coronavirus went down, they were more focused on getting IKE v2 for site to site. But L2TP for the client to site is on the roadmap. I don't have a hard ETA, but I do know it is on the roadmap and it is scheduled to be released soon.
Alex asks, is it recommended to get a valid SSL certificate for the USGDP, or just leave it as the self-signed?
You can leave it as a self-signed, but if you just want that extra layer of security, you can actually get a cert and install it. You just have to make sure that you install it on the other computers, though.
Is there some way to use a secure certificate or a pre-shared key with a less secure, like VPN option, or but still has fast connectivity? I think
you can actually lower your encryption to get faster speed, but you can use a cert as a method of authentication. Of course, that will increase the security. You can pretty much kind of load it up to the nines. You can do a low encryption key, but you can do a certificate, you can do extended authentication, and you can do two-factor authentication. So with all of those kind of combined, you're using a weaker cipher key for the encryption. However, you're using multiple factors of authentication in order to enhance the security of the product. So that's something that you can do, yes.
Paul actually made an interesting comment. They said that there's a lot of the cable companies and things like that. A lot of the service providers will publish their download speeds because that's what people are looking for, but really hide their upload speeds. So a lot of them can't tell what their speeds are. So I think the only way that you can kind of solve that is to do your speed test, right? Everybody likes to do their speed test to see how fast their upload and download speeds are. So definitely can confirm, what is the capacity of your office. Your main office may have a gig down, but maybe only like 50 megs up or something like that, and that would cause problems, or at least the user experience, from remote users. If you're saying, hey, I'm going to put 50 users out there, all remote desktoping or all connecting back and downloading files, that could cause, remote desktop to look laggy or become almost unusable, unbearable, to some people. So just keep that in mind. Alex asks, are there any knowledge based on how to set up the USG ATP VPN or Azure AWS?
Yes, actually we do. We can provide them with a link. We have the biz form, and then we also have our US technical support form that's on the US website that will actually provide that information. You can do a search within that title and look for the Azure VPN and setting up the VPN on the USGs.
Yeah, absolutely. We have all that resources there, Alex, for you. And if you want, you can send an email to myself. It's tri@zyxel.com. We'd love to point you in the right direction to finding those things. Also, the inside of a lot of the firewalls themselves, when you go to our product page, if you go to the download section, there's also an application note, and a lot of the application note tells you how to install and how to configure a lot of these kinds of applications. So take a look at that. If you can't find it, definitely let us know. We'll point you into the knowledge base on that. Also, that business form that we talked about, it also includes a lot of that information as well.
Also, I wanted to add, within the GUI itself, I believe that we did have the hyperlinks in the GUI to point to the actual documents. So if you ever get lost setting up a VPN, there should be a hyperlink within the GUI to actually point to the specific form entry to learn how to configure specific scenarios.
Yeah, and I think it says like knowledge base or something like that, or
Yeah.
CBE or something like that on the GUI itself. So yeah, we've integrated it so it'll send you to where you need to go to make sure you can configure that. Now, Matt has a question. Considering that upload speed's an issue, are there ways to bond the VPN like for site to site using multiple WAN providers?
No, but you can do VPN failover. That's what you can do with two WAN connections, but you can't bond the circuit together to get a faster throughput. So what you could end up doing though is if you want to, you can actually do a dual WAN, but you can set it up so that you have policy routes to force specific VPNs to connect to a specific WAN port.
Then you can use that to load balance people onto two different WANs. And we do have that high availability of the VPN feature as well, that makes sure that if one of the connections goes down, then all of the tunnels can be built to the other connection automatically. Thank you for your questions. All right, at this time, are there any last questions? Again, if you'd like to reach out to us, again, you can send me an email, tri@zyxel.com. We'd love to point you in the right direction, and also how to get these products, how to get them into your customers' hands. Definitely contact us. We have sales reps that are dedicated to working with you as partners. So look forward to getting you signed up, getting on board with that. Paul asks, any suggestions for a book to read or other resources to study so we can become as smart as you guys? Thank you. It's more about experience. I think it's more just diving into it. I think a lot of it going through, I don't think my college, even though I went to a great college, it didn't prepare me per se for this specific job. I think, most of the time it was my just networking experience, just diving in, pretty much thrown into the fire. I think, and some of you right now are dealing with that right now, right? Some of you may be like, well, we haven't really dived in, or maybe we did remote access, but not to this kind of scale. And so, you're being thrown into the fire to try to figure it out. And that's how pretty much, I think that's at least how I've learned a lot.
No, I'm the same way. I'm definitely the same way. They didn't prepare us for this at school. I mean, they taught us what VPNs were, but it's more of doing it and repetition and dealing with clients and having to deal with different scenarios that you learn more. So it's more about repetition of, doing this over and over again that you begin to gain the knowledge.
Yeah. And it's kind of like just like a technical knowledge base, right? Once you have the experience, you've done it once, then you get the experience. And so that's where we hope we can provide for you, so you don't have to learn on your own, everything per se, that we've done it already. Our support team is great at documenting a lot of the there are calls that come in and the different applications that are being called in on, and we will make the top top 10. We always go through like a top 10 calls list and create the support documents to make sure that you have that available, so that when you do call, we can just point you to that, and it makes it a lot easier for you to just follow the screenshots that you see there, and really kind of a self-help, because a lot of times you don't need to know how to do everything within the firewall. I think some of you already have experienced this. These firewalls that we have can be as simple or as complex as you want. And so we have that capability to do almost anything within that platform But for you to try to learn everything within it, it's going to be way too much overload. I think I still continue to learn new things out of the firewall, even though I've been, working here at Zyxel like 16 years now in May. So we will be having some celebration of that. But yeah, that's where we kind of get our knowledge base, just from experience. And I think you're all picking all that up too. And of course, attending these kinds of webinars, that's where you get to pick our brains and get to interact with us. So we appreciate that. Will you share the presentation file? Yeah, we'll get this presentation file sent to our marketing so that all of our, we'll have it posted as a PDF. If you also want to view it again, where it's going to be available to rewatch, or if you want to send it to any team members to watch over, that could be of benefit. You can have access to that through our Facebook page. Also, I believe it will be posted to our partner page and our YouTube. All right, I think at this time we have no other further questions. So again, thank you so much for joining us here at Tech Talk. I think we have some more that will be coming up in the future. So just take a look at that. Keep in touch with your emails. Yes, stay safe. Hopefully your isolation, this allows to help you guys spend some time away from your normal thing and be able to join us here. Again, I appreciate your time being able to be with us here today. And thank you for being a Zyxel partner, or at least being interested in what Zyxel has to offer. So we look forward to serving you. And thank you, Marcus, for your expertise and being with us today. So I appreciate it. All right, until next time, thank you from Zyxel.